the Wailing Wall. And the Jews go there annually, and they pray. And they were looking forward to the return of Jerusalem. Well, Jerusalem has come back now, but they still go there and pray. It was a reminder by Titus. He said, leave this wall standing, that they may remember the glory that they had, but they lost in our hands. Okay? The Jewish people praying at the Wailing Wall, the great stones of the temple. And the Romans built this Ark of Triumph for the General Titus because he conquered Jerusalem. And it still stands in Rome today. And this is actually a motif from that ark. And I think that's the last one there. Right. Okay, let's move on now. Now, Jesus will give us some more information about the end of the world. And he tells us in the so-called Olivet Discourse, he goes on the Mount of Olives. That's known as the Olivet. And therefore, he will begin to speak there on the end of the world to his disciples, and that is known as the Olivet Discourse. Here's what it says in the Gospel of Mark. And as he sat at the Mount of Olives, opposite the temple, Peter and James and John and Andrew asked him privately, tell us, when will this be? When will the end come? And what will be the signs when all these things are all to be accomplished? What are the signs that the end is coming? And Jesus began to say to them. So now we're going to have the words of Jesus concerning the end of the world. Let me just show you the Mount of Olives. This is constructed on the Mount of Olives. This is the place where Jesus ascended into heaven. And where will he return? He will return on the Mount of Olives. So this is the most likely site, according to the Acts of the Apostles, for the second coming of the world. Will we see it in Australia? Well, at that moment, everything will cease as we understand it, and all the laws of space and time will cease. It will be a very special moment, as Father Dimitri says, and at that moment, Jesus will return, and we will all see him. And that's the spot where we are told in the Bible he will come back. Okay, go to the next one. There's another shot of the Mount of Olives. Okay, let's just go on. The Mount of Olives opposite the temple side. The Mount of Olives is the temple side. The Mount of Olives again. Okay. So what does Jesus say about the end? What will happen? This is what he says. Number one, when the time is coming near, there will be spiritual deceit. What does that mean? False messiahs will appear. People who say, I am the Messiah. Okay? There will be false prophets, false teachers, and antichrists. Jesus says this about the end. He says, take heed, be careful that no one leads you astray. Be very careful that nobody deceives you. Many will come in my name. People will come preaching Jesus. And we will say, well, they look okay. They look honest. They perform miracles. They have miracle crusades. They must be from God. But Jesus says, be aware. Be very wary of people who come in my name, saying also, I am he, I am the Christ. And many of you will be led astray. So we need to have spiritual discernment. It's not just a question of coming to church. We need to have spiritual discernment. Maybe there are false teachers. You need to examine. Okay, Jesus points out that in the final days, it will explode. False teachers will explode. In the present century, we have had many people who claim to be God. Ramakrishna, a Hindu teacher in the 1930s. Like all good gurus, they leave Bombay and they're off to New York. What else does a good guru do? It's a career move, a desirable move. Ramakrishna did precisely that. He left Bombay and went to New York and found sort of cultic following among the middle class and the elite of New York. And they said, sounds like it's fun being God, So they met Ramakrishna as God, and he actually had many followers. In the 1960s, with the Beatle phenomenon, we have, of course, the phenomenon of the Maharishi Yogi, affectionately known as Yogi Bear. Now, Maharishi Yogi claimed instant enlightenment. He claimed he was the way in which you would receive total nirvana, peace, enlightenment, and so forth. And many people followed him. At that time in the 60s, the most influential people in popular culture followed him. John Lennon, George Harrison, Paul McCartney, the actress, Mia Farrow, and many Hollywood stars. They went to the Maharishi's retreat somewhere in the mountains of somewhere in India. And John Lennon very quickly picked up that there was something wrong with the Maharishi, because the Maharishi was making eyes at George Harrison's girlfriend. Hardly suitable for God. Jim Baker, in the 1980s, an evangelist in the United States, put a tremendous following until it was discovered that there was a lot of funny business going on in his ministry, and he was exposed for what he was. But in the meantime, he had led thousands and thousands and thousands astray. And in the 1990s, we have a particular gentleman called Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, who claimed, or at least his disciples claimed, that he was the Messiah and that he would save the world. Now, he died only fairly recently, and his disciples are a bit confused about that, because Messiahs aren't supposed to die. But he will resurrect. It's been 3 years, still waiting. Jesus said, be careful of your soul. Spiritual danger lies. I don't know, maybe some of you won't be very happy with what I'm about to say. Forgive me if I offend anybody here. But I'm aware of the ministry of Benny Hinn. Have you heard of Benny Hinn? Okay, I don't want to cause trouble here, but I will. Benny Hinn has an enormous following in the United States. His ministry comprises of billions of dollars. He himself lives in a very palatial home. He drives in very beautiful cars. He has an enormous salary. And everywhere he goes, he makes so-called, that he receives money donations. Now, Benny Hinn came to Australia fairly recently and left with thousands and thousands of dollars. Benny Hinn claims he performs miracles and he is able to heal people. Many people have died as a consequence of going to his ministry, thinking they were healed, throwing away their medicine, and subsequently dying. Now we've got to be careful about charlatans. How do I know if someone is not a true teacher of Jesus Christ? Please be careful. If someone comes to you with dollar signs in his eyes, seeking money from you, consistently seeking your money, they are not from God. Jesus walked barefoot on this earth. Benny Hinn drives in luxury cars. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't drive in luxury cars. But when you say you are a Christian messenger of God and you drive in a Rolls Royce, there's a problem here. So be careful of charlatans. That's the advice of Jesus. The second point that Jesus makes about the end of the world is that there will be an explosion of anti-God power. There's going to be an enormous increase in the principle of wickedness and rebellion against God. People will say, God is wrong. You shouldn't follow God. You should do whatever you want to do. There is no right and there is no wrong. Whatever you feel comfortable with, do it. And so, cleverly, subtly, God is being eroded from our schools. A few years ago, I worked in high schools in Victoria. I got the sack from the Victorian Education Department 3 times. Why? Because I spoke about Jesus to 14-year-old students. And that was a no-no. You shouldn't talk about Jesus to students. Then what do you talk about to 14-year-old students? Do you know what they were doing in the next class to learn? They were having projects on witchcraft and so forth. That's okay. Witchcraft is cool. God is uncool in the education department. Got to say it 3 times. Anti-God power in places of education. God is being replaced in our society, and that is part of the agenda, the end-time agenda. And Jesus says, be careful, because it's going to happen. Be aware of it. Don't be scandalized. Don't think, oh, isn't it terrible? You know, so many people are on drugs, and there's so much immorality these days. Hey, don't be surprised. It's supposed to happen. It's going to happen. But we have to hold firm to our faith. Now, Jesus spoke about the abomination of desolation. He said, there is a force of evil being unleashed into the world. And in the New Testament, there are various names for this power of evil. The Apostle Paul calls him the man of lawlessness. The book of Revelation calls this incarnate evil the beast. There are 2 beasts. And in John's letters, he's called the Antichrist. And so there is going to be an evil figure that will emerge in the last days. A person, a power that has tremendous supernatural powers and authority for evil, and will give him that power. And he's called the beast or the Antichrist and so forth. We'll discuss it when we talk about the book of Revelation. And Jesus said, another sign of the end is this. There's going to be worldwide hunger. People will be starving in the world. Now, isn't it interesting? You look at Africa, people of some parts of Africa are starving, and in other parts of the world, they've got a lot of food. But they can't really ship that food there because that would disrupt the economics of the world. The geopolitics would be disrupted. And so certain nations would rather burn their stock of grain so that the prices don't lower than to help out people who are hungry. Famine will increase. And Jesus says there will be more earthquakes in the last days, volcanic eruptions, there will be floods, an increasing natural catastrophe. And he says himself, there will be earthquakes in various places, and so forth, and famines, and so forth and so on. But that is just the beginning of the birth pang. The other side he gives, and that's a very tragic one actually, this is happening already. I know it is. When will the end occur? When is Jesus getting ready to return? When love is no longer present in the world. When there is the absence of love and the increase of the force of hatred, that's part of the agenda. And isn't it true when we look around today to find so much hatred? This is what Jesus said. And because wickedness is multiplied, most men's and women's love will grow cold. Love will grow cold. There will be a rise of hatred, hostility, brutality, wars, persecutions, betrayals, wars in this century. We claim to be the children of technology. I am a child of the 20th century. I belong to the computer age. I belong to the Sputnik age. I belong to the age of physics. I belong to the age of advanced medicine. Yes, that is true. We can take a heart out of a man and put it into some other person. We can take a liver from a woman and put it into another woman, and they will live. But we kill one another more than any other period in the history of humanity. Here is a shocking statistic. You think we are living in a sophisticated age? Wrong! This is the most brutal age of all time. It's brutal. Why is it brutal? Because in this age, brothers and sisters, there has not been so many people killed than in any other part of history ever before. Let me show you this, John. Let's go to the next one. Look at the statistics here. World War I, it's raining here. World War I, 20 million people died. World War II, 40 million people died. Then we had the Korean War. And that wasn't enough, because we needed a bit more here. We needed a bit more brutality. I mean, it wasn't enough that we annihilated ourselves, in the plains of France and Germany in the First World War, and then we bombed Hiroshima out of existence, and then we slaughtered 6 million Jews in the gas havens of Auschwitz and Poland and so forth. That wasn't enough. We need a bit more, So we had to have the Korean War. And that wasn't enough for class people from the United States, our blacks from the ghettos. We sent the uneducated whites into the battlefields of My Lai. And we kept our Harvard graduates in America. And we kept our Princeton graduates in the United States. But we sent our black people right there in the minefields of My Lai. Who cares if a black man loses his leg? He's not worth anything compared to the white boy from Harvard. That's what happened in the United States in the 1960s. But that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for us sophisticated 20th century people. We had to have another war in this century. Afghanistan, of course. I didn't really see them. So now we're creating a new war zone. And guess what? It's pretty close to Greece. It's called Kosovo. It's called Bosnia. Oh yes, look out for Bosnia. Again, it's going to erupt. How sophisticated we are. Jesus said, in the end, nation will make war against nation. And that's part of the sign that the end is near. And he also said, remember, this is hatred. The absence of love is hatred. And the absence of love leads to wars. But it also leads to persecution. And Jesus said, they will persecute you. You who are real believers of me, they will persecute you. And we see that in the history of the church, constant martyrdom, persecutions. In this century, we have seen so much persecution. Jesus said there will be three categories of Christians. Those who will endure to the end, when the persecution begins. There will be those, however, who will deny Christ. Some of us, when the pressure is on and the gun is pointing to your head, do you believe in Jesus? Well, you got a bullet there, mate? I sure have. We've got three here. Well, let me think about it, you know. Some of us will deny the Lord. And some of us will betray one another. He's a Christian. Go to him. Leave me alone. Jesus himself put it this way. They will deliver you up to tribunals, to courts and so forth. And you will be put to death, and you will be hated by all nations for the sake of my name. Persecution will come in the last days. Now, do you know, brothers and sisters, that in the 20th century, there has been more persecution against Christians than in any other time in human history? There have been more Christian martyrs in the 20th century than in any other part of the history of the world, including the Roman age. So we got the Roman age, then we've got the age of Marxism, communism in the Soviet Union, when so many people were slaughtered in the name of Marx. And then we've got a new persecutor out there, the Islamic fundamentalists, who are slaughtering Christians in places like Pakistan and in other places that have a Christian minority in Egypt. If you're a Coptic Christian, you have to be very brave. You can't build new churches. You don't have liberty that other Christians have in other parts of the world. Coptic students at the University of Cairo are actually persecuted. I'll give you an example of how it works. Let's say you study medicine. Tomorrow's the exam. Certain students come into your room, take the books right out the window. Where are your lecture notes? They're all gone. Psychologically, you're all messed up. You go into the exam the next day. You're not thinking about an exam. And so that is to be sure that the Coptic Christians do not really succeed in this particular country. So it's getting pretty scary with this new rise of fundamentalist Islam. That's their right. I'm not objecting to them having their faith, but I do object when they kill Christians and they persecute Christians. And Jesus says, and then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. Just quickly take you through a couple of slides and we'll take a small break here. This is Rome, ancient Rome, where so much Christian blood was shed. Right? This was all quickly. It's the Colosseum, the place where Christians were actually thrown to the lions in there. Okay, this is on. They would import tigers from Africa, leopards from Africa, lions from Africa. They would put them into cells opposite the Christians, and they would spend a couple of nights listening to the roar of the lions and the roar of the tigers, and then on a particular day, lo and behold, they'd go up, and then there would be slaughter of Christians. Okay, let's move on. This is a very early picture of Christian martyrs. This is one of the earliest we've got in history, showing the position of the posture of the martyr who is about to be devoured by a lion or whatever. These are the catacombs of Rome where Christians would hide underground in order to pray and worship Jesus Christ. The day will come that we will have to do the same. Not yet, but that's the sign of the end. We won't have churches like these anymore. When the end is coming, we'll be underground. Christianity will be a hidden religion. Otherwise, we will receive the mark of the beast. The end is still not here, but the wheels are rolling. Okay? And this is a icon from those days. Okay? And this is where Christians used to live in Asia Minor. They would actually dig into the rock there and form roofs. And if the soldiers would walk by, they wouldn't be able to notice them because it looked like part of the natural environment. But they would actually live in those kind of structures. Okay, very quickly, this goes through some of the other signs of the end. Jesus said the end will not come until the gospel is spread throughout the world, to all nations, in all languages. That hasn't happened yet. When will the end come? The gospel has to spread to the whole world and to all nations in all tongues. We tend to want to preserve one language in our church, the Greek language, and that's fine, and that's noble. But there's also room to understand that if we are going to be a church that will reach out to the whole world, we also have to incorporate other languages as well. Here in Australia, for example, I am firmly convinced that if the Orthodox Church is to grow, then we need to also incorporate English. Perhaps we need to have one English-speaking parish in every major capital city. Of course, under the Orthodox Diocese. That is not happening, fair enough. But the point is, how are we going to grow? How are we going to spread the gospel to all nations? And Jesus said, and the gospel must first be preached to all nations. That hasn't happened. Therefore, the end is not quite yet here. And then finally, before we look at the book of Revelation after our break, St. Paul. Now, actually, what I'm going to do is take a break here, and then we'll get back to St. Paul, and then finish up on the book of Revelation. All right, are there any questions you want to ask now, or Gerardo? By the way, what do you start questions now, or give the break and then come back?
I think it's probably better if we have a break.
Right.
People can sort of jump up and down on the spot between the pews,
Okay.
get the blood moving, and then come back, finish the talk, and maybe have some questions.
Done.
So let's take a 10-minute break, just a couple of announcements. There's the end of our brother's talk. There'll be time for questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, St. Paul, great apostle to the Gentiles. He tells us quite a bit about the coming of Jesus Christ at the end. Now, we need to know how St. Paul constructs his view of time. He has, in the beginning, the age he calls the present evil age. And that is determined by the works of the flesh. So, for Paul, if you are living by the principles of the flesh, you live in the present eon. came and was crucified. That inaugurates for Paul the end time. So where are we now? We are after the cross of Jesus Christ. These are the last days. Paul calls them the last days. Anything after the cross of Jesus Christ is the last days. Whether it's 1,000 years or 2,000 years or 3,000 years, these are the last days. And then the end will come when Jesus shall return. Alright, let's have a look at this schematically. We are either here or here. It depends. If you are living in the flesh and you are satisfying the principle of the flesh, then you are still living in the beginning of time. You have not been affected by the cross of Jesus Christ. But if you believe in Jesus, then you see and you understand that these are the last days. The unbeliever cannot see it, but the believer, he understands the power of the cross. She understands the power of the cross. These are eschate imera. These are the last days. When will the last days stop? The last days will stop on the day of the Lord. Imera to Kiriu. The day of the Lord. When is that? When Jesus will return. That's the line. Jesus will return. What happens when Jesus will return? That's the new age, according to Paul. So, actually, for Paul, the end times have been fulfilled. We are living in the end times. But there's something still ahead of us in the future, and that is the second coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. This is how Paul, the apostle, says it. Now, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, υπέρ της παρουσίας του Κυρίου ημών Ιησού Χριστού, and are assembling to meet him. So he's going to tell us now what's going to happen when Jesus comes back, or just before he comes back. What's going to happen? Well, Paul says this is what's going to happen. There is going to appear a certain person who is known as ο άνθρωπος της αγωνίας, the man of lawlessness. He's also called the son of perdition, or Ios της απολίας. Now that's the evil figure of St. Paul. He has to come. This evil figure has to appear, the son of perdition. What is he going to do? He is going to be the enemy of God. He will oppose God. He will sit in the temple of God. He will claim that he is God. And then there will be a great apostasy. People will believe him, and they will no longer believe in the true Jesus. That's what St. Paul says will happen just before the end. Listen to the words of the great apostle. He says, let no one deceive you. Don't let anybody deceive you in any way when it comes to this matter. For that day, the day of the Lord, will not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself against every object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, and he will claim to be himself God. So that has to happen. This man of perdition, this evil figure, will have to appear upon the face of the earth. But the end is near. Then the Lord